You clicked because you're standing at an airport gate in your mind right now, 60-something, watching the line snake forward, wondering why everyone else seems to know something you don't. Good, because they do, and I'm about to hand it to you. Here's the truth I sat on for years. There are at least 7 things an American over 60 can get at nearly every major airport in this country, for free or for a fraction of what the person next to you paid. And almost nobody at that ticket counter is going to tell you a single one of them. I watched it happen up close. I know exactly why they stay quiet. Stick with me to the end, because the last one I found buried in a federal law signed in 1986, a rule most gate agents have never even read out loud, and it lets someone you love walk you all the way to your seat without buying a ticket. This works whether you fly twice a year or twice a decade. Let me open the ledger. I spent a long stretch of my life working around the travel business, close enough to the counters, the gates, and the back offices to see how the money really moves. And the thing that stuck with me, the thing that still bothers me, is how much of what people paid for was already theirs for the asking. I remember standing near a gate in Charlotte one winter morning, watching an older woman in a gray coat count out cash for a wheelchair porter who should never have charged her a dime, and nobody stopped it. That was the day I started writing things down. So let me start with the one that costs you nothing but a little pride to ask for. If you are 75 years or older, the rules for getting through security in this country are not the same as they are for the man behind you in the line. Most people have no idea. They stand there in their socks, belt in one hand, shoes in the other, cold tile under their feet, because they assume everyone gets treated the same. You don't. Back in 2011, the folks who run airport security quietly started testing something different for older travelers. By 2013, it was rolled out wide. If you are 75 or older, you are allowed to keep your shoes on. You are allowed to keep a light jacket on. You do not have to do the shoe off, belt off, shuffle through in your socks routine that everybody else has come to accept as normal. And here's the part that really matters. If the machine beeps, they are supposed to offer you a chance to go back through and be re-screened before anyone puts hands on you. Now think about what that means. Think about the number of times you or your husband or your wife stood there balancing on one foot at 78 years old, trying to pull off a shoe while a line of strangers sighed behind you. That was never required of you. Not once. It was just easier for them to let you assume the rules were the rules. But here's what nags at me. If they made a special, gentler path for older Americans over a decade ago, why is it the best-kept secret in the terminal? Why did I never once hear an agent lean over and say, "Sir, ma'am, you can leave those on"? Because the whole machine runs on you not asking. And that's the thread I want to keep pulling, because it only gets worse from here. Let me lay down the second piece of evidence. And this one made my blood run a little hot the first time I understood it fully. Every major airport in the United States is required by federal law, to get you from the curb to your gate if walking that distance is hard on you. Wheelchairs, those little electric carts that beep down the concourse, a real human being to push you and carry your bag, and it does not cost one single penny. This comes from something called the Air Carrier Access Act, signed into law in 1986. That's nearly 40 years ago. The law says a carrier cannot refuse you assistance, and it cannot charge you for it. You do not need a doctor's note. You do not need to prove you're disabled. You do not need to be in a wheelchair already. If the walk from the ticket counter to gate B22 is too far for your knees, too far for your hip, too hard on your breath, you are entitled to a wheelchair and a person to push it, front to back, all the way to the jet bridge. And here's the part that made that woman in Charlotte hand over her cash. The service is free. The porter pushing that chair is often working for tips. Yes, and a few dollars for a kind young man who got you across a mile of terminal is a decent thing to do. But the service itself, the chair, the cart, the escort, that was paid for the moment you bought your ticket. She thought she was buying it. She'd already bought it. Now let me tell you how to actually get it, because knowing it exists is only half the battle. When you book your flight, or any time before you fly, you call the airline and you say 4 simple words: I need wheelchair assistance. That's it. They put a code on your reservation. When you arrive, you tell the person at the counter, and someone comes for you. If you forget to call ahead, you can still ask at the counter the day of. They are still obligated to help you. The electric carts down the long concourses work the same way. You wave one down, or the agent radios one, and you ride instead of limp. I watched a man in Phoenix, easily 80, wave off a cart 3 times because he thought each ride would cost him $15, like the golf cart at his club. He walked the whole terminal and missed a connection because his legs gave out halfway. Nobody told him it was free, because telling him was never anybody's job, and that's exactly the problem I kept running into. But if they'll move your body across the airport for free, you have to start wondering what else they've been letting you pay for that was never really priced the way you thought. Which brings me to the receipt that doesn't add up, the price of the ticket itself. Here's a number that used to be printed right in the airline brochures and has quietly vanished from the screens you book on today. The senior fare. For decades, American carriers openly offered discounted tickets to older travelers. Some sold booklets of senior coupons. You'd buy 4 or 8 flight segments at a cut rate and use them through the year. My father had one. It sat in his top drawer next to his reading glasses, and he flew to see his grandkids on it 3 times a year. Those senior fares did not fully disappear. They got hidden. When everything moved to booking on a screen, the senior fare mostly stopped showing up in the search results the average person sees. The website shows you the standard price. But pick up the phone, call the airline's reservation line, and ask directly, do you have a senior fare for this route? And on certain airlines, certain routes, the answer is still yes. It is not advertised. It is not on the banner. It only exists for the person who knows the words to say. Now I'll be straight with you, because I'm handing you evidence, not a sales pitch. Not every airline offers it anymore, and the ones that do keep it thin and keep it quiet. But I have watched people knock real money off a fare simply by refusing to accept the screen price as final and asking a human being the plain question. On some international carriers and a few smaller regional lines, the senior discount is alive and well. The trick is, nobody hands it to you. You have to reach for it. And that reaching, that's the whole game we're talking about today. Think about what that quiet vanishing actually did. A whole generation grew up expecting a break for their gray hair, the way they got a break at the movie theater and the diner and the museum. And one by one, without any announcement, those breaks got pulled off the shelf where you could see them and slid under the counter where you have to know to ask. Somebody profited every single time you booked the full fare because you didn't know the discount still had a pulse. And that's the pattern, isn't it? Every one of these perks is real. Every one of them still exists. They were just moved to where you'd never look. Therefore, the people who kept the old habit of asking kept getting the old prices, and everybody else quietly paid more. So let me show you the people whose entire purpose is to help you ask. There is an organization in this country older than most of the airlines put together. It's called Travelers Aid. It goes all the way back to 1851 in St. Louis, when a mayor named Brian Mullenfee left money in his will to help travelers heading west, who got confused, lost, or stranded. That fund grew into a network, and today Travelers Aid runs desks and volunteer booths inside dozens of the busiest airports in America, places like Reagan National outside Washington, and the big hubs where the concourses stretch on forever. Here is what they do, and here is why almost nobody uses them. They will walk you to your gate. They will help you read the board when the gate changes at the last second and your heart starts pounding. They will help you find the right shuttle between terminals. If you're flying alone at 72 and you're nervous about a tight connection, a Traveler's Aid volunteer, often a retiree themselves, someone who knows that airport cold, will personally get you where you're going. And they do it for free, because helping stranded and confused travelers is the entire reason they were founded 170 years ago. And that same quiet arrangement, real help sitting there, paid for, unmentioned, is exactly what I found at the bank counter, in the agency letters, and down at the motor vehicle office. Nobody behind those desks is required to tell you about the free form that keeps your account from being frozen, or the back pay you can still claim, or the recertification deadline that quietly stops your check if the letter sits unopened. So I wrote 3 books about it myself, in plain language, with do-it-this-week steps for somebody who has never touched a computer. No lawyer, no moving a single account, nothing new to buy. You will know which form to ask for, what words to say, and when to sign it, before it is needed, not after. To get the collection, scan the QR code right there on your screen. Link in the description. Pinned comment. Now let me get back to that terminal, because I already know who is sitting there thinking none of this is meant for them. I want to stop right here and talk directly to you. Yes, you, the one thinking this is all fine for somebody who flies all the time, somebody with money, somebody younger and quicker on their feet than you feel these days. This next part is built for you specifically, because you don't need a single new tool. You don't need to be tech savvy. You don't need to download anything or sign up for anything. Everything I'm about to tell you, you can use with the exact same body, the same phone, and the same life you have this very afternoon. Here's the plainest one. Before your next flight, sit down at your kitchen table with the phone you already own and call the airline's main number, the one printed right on your confirmation. You say 3 things in order. 1. I am a senior traveler and I'd like to know if there's a senior fare on this route. 2. I will need wheelchair or cart assistance from the counter to the gate. 3. Please note on my reservation that I may need extra help. That's it. 3 sentences at your own kitchen table, and you have just unlocked things that the person paying full price and walking a mile on bad knees will never get, because they never made the call. And if you're afraid to fly alone, afraid of getting lost in a terminal the size of a small town, you write down 2 words on the notepad by your phone before you leave the house. Traveler's Aid. When you land, you find their desk, or you ask any airport worker where it is, and you let a volunteer walk you the rest of the way. You are not a burden. You are using something a St. Louis mayor set up for you before your grandparents were born. It is yours. But knowing these services exist is one thing. Getting a fair shake when you need to bring someone with you. That's where I found the crack that runs deepest, and it's where the story starts to turn. Let me lay down the 5th piece, because this one touches the folks who are afraid to travel at all now. Say you can't really manage a flight on your own anymore. Say you need someone beside you, to help you to the restroom, to help in an emergency, to speak up if something goes wrong at 30,000 feet. A lot of older Americans just stop flying entirely because they assume that means buying 2 full-price tickets, and who can do that on a fixed income? Here's what that same Air Carrier Access Act framework recognizes. If you genuinely require a safety assistant to fly, someone whose job on that trip is your safety, not their own vacation. The airlines have provisions for that. In certain situations, if the airline itself decides you cannot fly alone for safety reasons and requires you to bring an attendant, they are not supposed to charge that attendant for the seat. Now, that specific free seat situation is narrow, and I won't oversell it to you. But the door it opens is real. You can call, explain your medical situation plainly, and ask what accommodations exist for a required travel companion. Most people never ask because they assume the answer is no. The answer is not always no. And there's a cousin to this that almost nobody talks about anymore: the fare for grief. When someone in your family dies and you have to fly at the last minute, the fare for a next-day ticket can be brutal, 4 or 5 times the normal price, because that's when they've got you cornered. For years, several airlines quietly kept what they called bereavement fares, or compassion fares, a reduced last-minute price for a death or serious illness in the immediate family. Like the senior fare, it got pulled off the website, but on some carriers it still exists behind the phone line, for the person who calls, explains, and asks. In the worst week of your life, that phone call can be worth hundreds of dollars. I remember a widow I spoke with who'd flown to 3 funerals in 2 years and paid top dollar every time, never once told that the airline she'd been loyal to for 30 years had a compassion desk. 30 years of loyalty, and the kindness was there the whole time, just never offered, only available to the one who knew to ask. That's the cost of not knowing, laid out in plain numbers, hundreds of dollars per trip, paid over and over, by good people who trusted the price on the screen. So by now you might be thinking the whole terminal is quietly rigged against you, but the deeper I dug, the more I realized these weren't secrets someone locked in a vault. They were just perks that stopped being announced. Therefore, they only survived for the people stubborn enough to keep asking the old questions. And that led me to the 6th thing, the one hiding in plain sight in every terminal you've ever rushed through. Every big airport in this country is full of comfort that costs nothing, and older travelers walk right past it because it isn't marked with a big sign that says free. Start with water. You are not required to buy a $5 bottle of water past security. Nearly every modern American airport now has water bottle refill stations, those tall fountains with a spout up top, sitting right there between the gates. You bring an empty bottle through security, empty, and you fill it for nothing on the other side. For a person on blood pressure medication who needs to stay hydrated, that's not a small thing. That's your health, and they'd rather sell it back to you at the newsstand. Then there are the quiet rooms. Most major airports keep interfaith chapels or meditation rooms, small, calm, carpeted spaces off the main concourse where you can sit in silence, away from the announcements and the crowds. Some of the newer ones have added sensory rooms and rocking chairs and dim lighting. If your heart is racing before a flight, if the noise is too much, if you just need to close your eyes somewhere that isn't a hard plastic gate seat, those rooms exist, and they are free, and almost nobody your age is told they're there. And then there's rest itself. A lot of airports now keep designated quiet zones and even free rocking chairs. Boston's airport put in rocking chairs years ago, and other airports followed. You can sit in a real rocker, by a window, and watch the planes instead of paying to sit in a lounge. It won't cost you a cent, but you have to know to look for it, because the only seating anyone points you toward is the seating that sits you right in front of a place that wants your money. Here's the thread tying all 6 of these together, and I want you to feel it before I show you the last one. Not a single thing I've told you today is illegal, hidden in a vault, or hard to get. Every one of them is sitting in plain view, paid for, waiting. They simply stopped announcing them, because a confused traveler who doesn't know their rights is a profitable traveler. The screen shows you the full fare. The porter waits for you to assume the chair costs money. The line lets you take your shoes off. It all runs on the same quiet bet that you won't ask. But now we come to it. The last document. The one I found buried in the language around that 1986 law and the airline rules built on top of it, and the one that, when I first understood it, actually made me put my pen down and sit back in my chair. Because this one isn't about you traveling more comfortably. It's about not being alone. Here it is. If you are an older traveler who needs assistance, a person you love, your son, your daughter, a neighbor, a friend, can get a pass to come through security with you and walk you all the way to your gate, sit with you until they call your row, and see you onto that plane, without buying a ticket, without flying anywhere themselves. It's called a gate pass or an escort pass, and the airlines have the authority to issue one for exactly this purpose, to accompany a passenger who needs assistance. Let me make sure you understand what I just said, because I know it sounds too generous to be real in this day and age. Your daughter drives you to the airport. Instead of hugging you goodbye at the curb and watching you disappear into a security line, alone at 79 years old, she walks up to the ticket counter with you, asks for a gate pass to escort a passenger who needs assistance, shows her own ID, and goes through security right beside you. She carries your bag. She finds your gate. She sits with you. She waits until you're safely on the plane. Then she goes home. No ticket, no flight, just there, with you the whole way through. And on the other end, it works in reverse. Your son can request a gate pass to meet you at your arrival gate, to be standing right there when you step off the jet bridge in a strange city, instead of you wandering a mile of unfamiliar concourse trying to find him past the checkpoint. This is the thing families stopped doing after the rules tightened decades ago, and most people simply assumed it was gone forever. It was never gone. It got quiet. The airlines kept the authority to grant these passes for passengers who need help. They just stopped mentioning it, and a whole generation grew up believing the curb was as far as a loved one could go. Here's exactly how you claim it, because I don't hand you a key without showing you the lock. You or your family member goes to the airline's ticket counter, not the gate, the main check-in counter, on the day of the flight. You ask, in these words, "I'd like a gate pass to escort a passenger who needs assistance to the gate." The escort brings a government photo ID. The airline runs them through the same security screening as any traveler. It's up to the individual airline, so you call ahead the day before and confirm their policy, and you ask them to note it. Some will tell you yes, on the spot. And when they do, you have just turned the loneliest part of flying, that long walk away from the people you love, into a world that feels bigger and faster and colder every year, back into what it used to be. Someone beside you, all the way to your seat. Think about who kept this alive. Not the booking screens, not the ads. It survived in the fine print of a law from 1986, and in the memory of the few gate agents old enough to remember granting these passes every single day. It survived quietly, waiting for someone to ask for it again. And now you're holding the proof. You're one of the people who knows. This weekend, if you've got a trip coming, or someone in the family does, you can pick up the phone and confirm it for yourself. So let me put it plain, the way I wish somebody had put it to me years ago, before I watched all those good people overpay. What they took from you wasn't money. Not really. It was the knowledge that you were never as alone, or as helpless, or as broke at that airport as they let you believe. Every one of these 7 things was already yours. You just had to be told. And that's who you are, isn't it? You're the kind of person who always suspected that the useful stuff, the fair prices, the real help, The ordinary human kindness didn't disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because somebody figured out they could make more money if you forgot it ever existed. You were right. You were right the whole time. Now I want to hear from you. Of these 7, which one hit you hardest? Was it the free wheelchair you or your spouse paid a porter for? Was it the senior fare hiding behind the phone line? Or was it that gate pass, the one that lets your kid walk you all the way to your seat? Tell me in the comments right now. Type the number and type where you're watching from, because I read them, and I want to know which airport in this country still does right by its elders. If you've ever paid for one of these things not knowing it was free, say so. Somebody else needs to read that they weren't the only one. And if you believe, like I do, that this kind of practical American know-how was buried on purpose so a whole generation would keep paying for what was already theirs, then you belong here. Subscribe and stand with the folks who are digging it all back up, one buried document at a time. Because the next ledger I'm opening is about the little card in your wallet that quietly unlocks an airport lounge you've been walking past for years. And I found the trick to it in a place you would never think to look. I'll see you there. Before you go, if this video helped, there's a deeper version waiting for our members. You can ask me your own question, and a real person answers, and you'll be among thousands of folks just like you. Point your phone's camera at the code on screen. It takes less than a minute, and you can cancel anytime. No risk,